The story of Mahabharata can be started from a lot of places. We could start from Prajapati Daksha, we could start from Manu, we could start from Bharata, Kuru, and various other kings, and can go all the way up to the last well-known king, Parikshita. But typically, the story started at King Shantanu. Now, Shantanu is the Kuruvamshi king ruling over Hastinapura. One day, as he's walking on the banks of Ganga, he sees a beautiful woman, someone with divine beauty, and he is enamored by her. He is in love at first sight, and as is expected of a king, he walks up to her and proposes marriage. This woman is the river goddess Ganga incarnate. She is in this world to fulfill a divine purpose. She accepts the proposal to marriage, but sets three conditions. She says, I will marry you, O king, if you agree to these three conditions. If you agree that you will not question me, you will not stop me from doing what I'm doing, and you will never criticize me. Now, this should have raised some red flags in the mind of Shantanu, but he is so taken in by her that he accepts all these conditions. They get married, Hastinapura celebrates. In months to come, Ganga is pregnant. In times, she delivers a child. Something unexpected happens though. As the child is born, swaddled in white clothes, Ganga carries the child to the river by her name. And with Shantanu watching from behind, drowns the child. Now, the king is bound by his promises, his vows that he has made. He does not question her. One wonders how life continues because, smiling, Ganga comes back to the palace and they start living together once again as if nothing happened. In time, she has another child, and another, and another. 7 successive children are given birth to and drowned in the river. And Shantanu watches, speechless, spellbound. When the 8th child is about to be also drowned in the river, Shantanu can take it no more. He yells from behind, "Stop! What are you doing? How cruel can you be?" And in one fell swoop, he has broken all his promises. He has stopped her, he has questioned her, and he has criticized her. Ganga turns towards Shantanu with a child in her hand still and says, "Since you've broken your promises, I can no longer live with you." And taking the child, she disappears. Shantanu is in deep depression now. Till now, he had the wife at least. But now, he's all alone. For years to come, he will roam on the banks of Ganga, full of despondency, hoping he'll find his treasure once again where he has lost it. And one day, many, many years later, he sees a young boy. The boy is shooting arrows at the river, and where the arrows have landed, it has created a dam-like structure and stopped the flow of the river itself. This does not look right. What boy would have a power to achieve this unless the river herself is permitting it? Out of maternal affection, maybe? And as he thinks about it, Ganga is on her banks once again. His hope and his thoughts had led him towards the truth. This is his long lost son. Ganga introduces the boy as their child Devavrata. She says, I have ferried him across the three worlds, taken him to the greatest teachers in humans, gods, Gandharvas. He has learned everything there is to learn. He is an expert in both Shastras and Shastras, the scriptures and usage of weapons. He is the perfect heir that you wanted for Kuruvamsha. I hand him back to you. And then she disappears. It's like happiness is back in Hastinapura once again. Shantanu is so proud of the son who is perfect in all respects. Happiness has returned, but will it stay? Hastinapura is not used to happiness for a long time. What divine purpose was Ganga trying to fulfill? That's a long story as well. The divine beings known as Vasus once offended sage Vasishta. They stole a cow from him, and in anger, Vasishta cursed them to be born in the mortal world on the earth and suffer penance for their sin. The Vasus went and begged goddess Ganga to get them out of this difficult situation. The curse had to be fulfilled. They have to be born on earth, but they don't have to live there long enough. Ganga agrees to bear them as her children and immediately drown them in the river so that they are dead and back to their divine abodes. One Vasu, who was responsible for the mischief the most, has to pay the price for all of them, live the longest and suffer the longest. That boy is the boy Devavrata, who will go on to become Bhishma. With Devavrata, happiness is back in Hastinapura. Shantanu the king no longer strolls on the banks of Ganga with sadness. Instead, hope is back in his life. One day, he comes across another girl, someone from whom a divine scent emanates. Shantanu asks her to marry him. But unlike Ganga, Satyavati does not say yes. Instead, she says, speak to my father and let him give permission for this wedding. Shantanu the king goes and talks to the head of fishermen, because it is he who is the father of Satyavati. He is happy to receive King Shantanu and even agrees to marry his daughter off to him. But he has a few conditions of his own. He wants the children of Satyavati to be the rulers. Shantanu already has an heir, and Devavrata, who is the crown prince at the moment, is the best that can be for Hastinapura. Disagreeing with this condition, Shantanu goes back home and slips into depression once more. On enquiry, he finds out from his charioteer that Shantanu had visited the fisher folk and from that point onwards has been sad. Devavrata goes and talks to the head of the fishermen, finds out what happened and says, that's a simple condition. I make a vow that I will not sit on the throne of Hastinapura and I will ensure Satyavati's child does. Her father, not to be outdone, says, your word I trust, Devavrata. But one day, when your children come of age, and they will, before Satyavati's children do, what's going to stop them from getting on the throne? With the same simplicity, Devavrata says, that's easy. And this is when Devavrata makes his biggest vow yet. He says, that can only happen if I have children. I, Devavrata, make a vow that I will never marry and I will never father children. This fierce pratigya this great vow. This turns young Devavrata into Bhishma. When he makes this vow, they say the world stood still for a moment because of the fierceness of what was said. For a moment, birds forgot how to fly, rivers forgot how to flow, and the universe was shocked into silence by what was said. Satyavati's father was happy. Shantanu and Satyavati wed. Satyavati and Shantanu wed. Satyavati bears two children, Chitrangada and Vichitravirya. It looks once again like happiness is back in Hastinapura. But happiness has a way with Hastinapura. It does not stay there for too long. Why is this promise to not get married or to father any children considered Bhishma Pratigya? We have to delve a little deeper into what are called Purusharthas, or the purpose of human existence. According to the scriptures, there are four Purusharthas. One is Dharma, the second is Artha, the third is Kama, and the fourth is Moksha. Now, Moksha represents salvation or breaking out of the cycle of births. But that is not something you can work towards. So the three things that you can do as Purusharthas are Dharma, Artha and Kama. Dharma is good behavior or doing what is right in the moment. Artha is worldly wealth. Think of it like gold and collection of wealth. Kama, while it represents general desire, in this specific case, we are talking sexual desire and the willingness to have children, to continue the lineage. In accepting that he will not marry and he will not father children, what Bhishma has done is he has made up a pact that he is happy to never attain moksha in his life. And that is what makes this a Bhishma Pratigya. In time, King Shantanu dies. His two children with Satyavati, Chitrangada and Vichitravirya, have turned out to be some really talented children. Chitrangada becomes the king and defeats everyone who can be defeated. He defeats the men, he defeats Suras, he defeats Asuras. And when there is no one left to defeat, a Gandharva king who shares his name, a Gandharva known as Chitrangada, he gets into a fight with Shantanu's son Chitrangada. They say the fierce battle goes on for 3 years and then the Gandharva Chitrangada prevails. Vichitravirya is still a young boy, not of age. But since his brother is dead now, he ascends the throne of Hastinapura. Bhishma, obviously because of his vow, will not take over the throne. But he is ruling Hastinapura through Vichitravirya. In time, Vichitravirya grows up to become an adult, and it is heard that the king of Kashi is performing Swayamvara for his 3 children, Amba, Ambika, Ambalika. Bhishma sets forth towards Kashi so that he may win the hands of these maidens for his stepbrother Vichitravirya. When Bhishma reaches there and wants to take all 3 girls away, there ensues a fight. Single-handedly, he defeats all the kings. There is special mention about his fight with King Shalva. He defeats that king also, abducts the 3 girls and brings them to Hastinapura for his brother Vichitravirya. As they reach there, the eldest of the 3 sisters, Amba, says, I cannot marry Vichitravirya because I am in love with the King Shalva. King Shalva. And Bhishma agrees to this and lets her go. The other 2 sisters, Ambika and Ambalika, are married to Vichitravirya. In time, Vichitravirya, though young, is ravaged by consumption or tuberculosis and succumbs to it. There is no other heir left to take over Hastinapura's throne. Bhishma refuses to sit on it, and the two brothers are dead. Satyavati comes up with a plan. She says to Bhishma, who is of her own age almost, but is her son really. Satyavati says to Bhishma, now is the time to revive the lineage. Forget about the promises you made. The people for whom you made these vows are all dead. You and I can make a decision. You must father children with Ambika and Ambalika, the widows of your dead brother, and save the Vamsha. Bhishma is adamant. He disagrees. Is Hastinapura doomed to perish without an heir? Remember, happiness has a strange relationship with Hastinapura. In many retellings of Mahabharata, immediately the story of Amba is told. In the unabridged version of Mahabharata though, Amba's story does not immediately feature. It is told way later, just before the beginning of the war, and it's called Ambopakhyana and is recited by Bhishma. We will give here a small version of it, and the details will be dealt with in time. Amba, when she is sent back to Shalva, faces a strange fate. The king Shalva will not marry her because he feels she is fair and square won by Bhishma and belongs to him. Unhappy, she returns back to Bhishma and says, because of you, the person I chose will not marry me, so you marry me. Bhishma says, I have made a vow and I cannot. She tries to make another compromise. Let me marry where my sisters are marrying. To which Vichitravirya does not agree, because she who loves another, he can't marry. So she is stuck. She blames all her misfortunes on Bhishma and goes on to become Shikhandi in her next life, becoming the reason for the death of Bhishma. But those details will come in time. In the previous video, we saw Bhishma declining Satyavati's offer to father children with the wives of his stepbrother Vichitravirya. Now, Satyavati is left with no choice but to call upon someone from her past. This was when she was called Matsyagandha, someone who stank of fish. Once, when ferrying a boat in the river, she met a sage called Parashara. One thing led to another, and she had a child with him. That child was born on an island, was dark in skin color when he was born. That boy went on to classify the Vedas. He is at once the spectator, the composer, and a participant in the story we are reciting today, the Mahabharata. That boy was Vedavyasa, who's now grown on to become a great sage. Satyavati invites him to the palace and gives him the task of helping continue the Kuru Vamsha. Vedavyasa says he will stay in the palace for a year, spend time knowing the widows of his brother, but Satyavati will have none of it. This has to be done now. So, even as he has finished his long travel and looking muddy and somewhat scary, Satyavati ensures that he has sambhoga with Ambika and Ambalika on 2 successive nights. So, night approaches and Vyasa is now in the bedchambers of Ambika. She is so scared seeing him that she closes her eyes and just wants the deed done and forgotten. Once Vyasa is out of the bedchambers, he informs Satyavati that Ambika will have a child, but because she kept her eyes closed throughout the union, that child will be born blind. Ambalika is now sent the next night. She is so scared of him that she turns pale. Vedavyasa comes out and reports to his mother that she will also have a child, but that child will be born pale. In time, Satyavati decides another attempt needs to be made and asks Ambika to go once again. But this time, Ambika is so scared, she does not go herself, but instead sends her maid. The maid serves him with dignity, serves him with respect, and once the union is complete, he comes out and reports to his mother that this child born to the maid is going to be one of the most intelligent and dharmic persons there is. Vedavyasa departs, and in time 3 children are born. The eldest one is Dhritarashtra, who is born blind. The boy after him, born to Ambalika, is Pandu, and as expected, he is born pale. The maidservant Parishrami's son is born perfect in all regards and is named Vidura. Now another conundrum presents itself. How can a blind boy be king? So when they come of age, Pandu is made the king instead of Dhritarashtra. This singular decision to make the younger boy the king ahead of the elder boy creates a chain reaction of such magnitude that it will eventually lead to the war known as Mahabharata. When Vedavyasa is summoned to father children on Vichitravirya's widows, we need to understand a few things. One, this practice is called niyoga. The children born of niyoga are to be treated as if they are the legal heirs of the dead father. The person who is responsible for childbirth, the man who is responsible for childbirth, in this case Vyasa, would have no legal authority over the children. Usually, when the practice of niyoga was performed, a sannyasi was used, because since they had already renounced the world, there was no chance they will come back because of paternal affection and claim legally that it is their child. So when Vedavyasa continues the lineage of the Kuru Vamsha, one has to understand that Vedavyasa is in the picture only as a provider for the sperm and nothing more. The children are as equal as any child who might have been born of Vichitravirya himself. Let's continue the story of Pandu. He, in spite of being the younger sibling, ascended the throne of Hastinapura because Dhritarashtra was found unfit due to his blindness. While this might have left some residual bitterness in Dhritarashtra, the coronation of Pandu was considered a great moment, and Pandu turned out to be a great king. He expanded the boundaries of Hastinapura, he made the kingdom richer and more powerful. One day, when he was out on a hunt, he made a mistake for which he paid the price for the rest of his life. Using the Vidya of Shabdavedi, he shot a deer, which was in the throes of passion with a female deer. Just before they died, the animals turned out to be a rishi and his wife in an intimate situation. Pandu tried to argue with them and talked about his right to hunt, and he did not know about them being in a different form, but the rishi would have none of it. He cursed Pandu, the king, and said, when you ever try to get intimate with your wife, you will die too. Now, this was a big problem also because Pandu had no children, no heir. And he was so upset by what he had done that he pretty much stepped down from the throne and went to live a life of asceticism with his wives, Kunti and Madri. When they reached the ashrama in which they planned to spend the rest of their lives, the question of children arises. Yet again, Niyoga comes to rescue. Now, they don't have to summon another rishi because as a teenager, Kunti has a bit of a past too. Sage Durvasa had given her a boon that should she desire, she might summon any god and they will be forced to give her a child. She had actually tried this to check out of curiosity and she had a child before she was ever married. The Vashikarana mantra that she is aware of, that comes to the rescue. Kunti prays to God Dharma or Yama and is blessed with a child. That child is named Yudhishthira. This child is born sooner than another important character in Mahabharata called Duryodhana, and the implications of that is a story for another day. In time, she uses the same mantra once again to summon Lord Vayu or Maruta and is blessed with another child who is going to be named Bhima. She also summons Lord Indra, and that child that she gets from Lord Indra is named Arjuna. Kunti shares this mantra with her co-wife as well. Madri uses the same mantra on the Ashwin Kumars and she is blessed with twins. They are named Nakula and Sahadeva. This way, the family of Pandu is complete. The children, the mothers and the father are all living in a bliss they have found in their own life. And one day, when Kunti and the children are out playing, Pandu forgets about the curse that is upon him, is attracted to his wife Madri and tries to get intimate with her. And in his moment of pleasure, he succumbs to the curse and dies. Madri believes herself responsible for what has happened and decides to become a sati. She is burnt on the funeral pyre along with Pandu. Kunti is now a widow and a mother to 5 children, and she decides on that day that she is going to treat each one of them equally, whether they are her own or her co-wife Madri's. So when we talk about the 5 Pandavas, we call them Pandavas because they are the sons of Pandu. But we are used to thinking of Pandavas as if they are all real brothers, often forgetting that they are step-brothers. This is by choice that Kunti had decided to raise them all as her children. Pandu's reign is over. Pandu's life is over. Kunti is now faced with a difficult choice of how to lead her life. She decides to bring the Pandavas back to Hastinapura, where Dhritarashtra is king now. Long, long ago, when Kunti was still a teenager and living in her adopted father Kunti Bhoja's residence, a sage named as Durvasa comes to stay at the palace. This sage Durvasa is known for his anger and his temper in giving curses to anyone who causes him the least bit of inconvenience. So, when he is staying in the palace, Kunti's father asks Kunti to take care of Durvasa. She takes such good care of him that as he is about to leave, he is surprised that he has never encountered anyone who did not make him upset in any way. He gives her a gift. It's a Vashikarana mantra or a mantra that is used to bring someone under your control. He tells her, whoever you summon, even if they be the gods, they will be under your control and they will be obligated to give you a son. Now, in time, Kunti's curiosity gets the better of her and she decides she needs to test this out. One day, she summons the sun, half expecting nothing will happen, but the sun is divided into 2 portions. One half is taking care of the worldly responsibilities that the sun god is expected to take care of, and the other half is now under Kunti's control, and he cannot leave until he fulfills the requirement of the mantra. Kunti is blessed with a child, except it's not a blessing, it's a curse, because she is unmarried and she is so worried about what the society is going to say that she covers that child in cloth, puts it in a basket and floats it on river Ganga, asking river Ganga to make a promise that she will preserve these children. The irony of this is stunning, because Ganga has herself ensured the death of 7 children before in the story. However, the river Ganga keeps her promise to Kunti and saves that child. That child is going to go on to become the Pandavas' greatest enemy, even though he is the eldest of them. That child is going to be Karna, but his story is for another day. Let's now talk about Dhritarashtra. The boy who was born blind was considered unfit to be the king, even though he was the eldest, and was actually told to his face that he was unfit. He still tried to be good with his brother, help him when he was a king, and eventually when Pandu made the mistake that made him step down from the throne of Hastinapura, grudgingly Bhima makes Dhritarashtra the king, and immediately ensures that Vidura is appointed as a counselor, and Dhritarashtra is told that every decision he makes, he needs to consult it with Vidura before he puts that into action. It's almost as if Bhima and Vidura are ruling in Dhritarashtra's stead, and when Dhritarashtra gets married to Gandhari, the princess of Gandhara, she makes a strange decision. When she finds out that her husband is blind, instead of deciding to be his eyes and help him in managing the kingdom, she decides to tie a cloth over her eyes herself and decides, if my husband can't see this world, nor will I. Along with Gandhari comes her brother Shakuni. In time, Gandhari becomes pregnant, and months pass. They hear of the birth of Yudhishthira, the eldest son of Pandu. Dhritarashtra realizes that this is going to turn into something nasty, because his brother's son is now the eldest representative available in the family. But Gandhari has been pregnant almost for a year and is not delivering her child. A year turns into 2, and for some reason the child is still not born. Eventually, when the eldest son Duryodhana is born, it is on the same day as Bhima, the second son of Pandu. The difference between ages of these important characters is going to play a big role in the epic, but that's a story for another day. We know that the sons of Pandu are called Pandavas, and the sons of Dhritarashtra are called Kauravas. The name Kauravas actually derives from their ancestor known as Kuru. The son of Kuru are Kauravas. But if we were to use the same concept as Pandavas, the sons of Dhritarashtra are now going to be actually called Dhartarashtras. There's a lot of times in the Mahabharata when this term is used, and it applies to 100 boys and 1 girl. The eldest of whom is Duryodhana. The girl is called Dushala. Gandhari is living a life of a blind woman even though she can see. Dhritarashtra is worried about how the kingdom is going to pass into his brother's children's hands. Shakuni is playing his own games. And in between all of this is growing the young boy Duryodhana, who will eventually challenge Pandavas and all those who love them. For now, these boys are growing up in the palace, knowing they have cousins who live in forest. In time, they hear the news of Pandu's death, and Kunti, along with the 5 Pandava brothers, has returned back to Hastinapura. So what's with 100 children then? Gandhari had prayed to sage Vyasa that she should have 100 boys who are as strong as her husband Dhritarashtra. Vyasa had given her that promise that she will have 100 children. So when she becomes pregnant, time goes on and on and on. Eventually, 2 years later, she gives birth to a piece of flesh which is nothing like a child. Distressed, she calls upon Vyasa. Vyasa comes to her and says, you did not have enough time to grow 100 children. So prepare 100 pots of ghee and I will ensure that this flesh cut into 100 pieces will grow to be 100 sons. In the last moment, she said, I want a daughter as well. So the flesh is cut into pieces, placed in the pot of ghee, and there it is incubated and grows in time to become 100 boys and 1 girl. Long, long ago, there was a sage named Mandavya. He was performing a very difficult penance in which he had to hold his right hand raised high above his head and would not speak. One day, some robbers were chased by the men from king's side because they had stolen some valuables. They found the ashrama of sage Mandavya to be a safe place to hide. The king's men came and questioned the sage, who would not respond because of his penance. When the king's men went and looked inside his ashrama, they found the robbers hiding there with everything that was stolen. They connected the two things together and decided unilaterally that this sage was the chief of robbers, and along with the robbers, he was taken to the king and punished. The punishment was impalement by a trident. While the robbers died, because of the powers of yoga, this sage lived and suffered. Eventually, when the king found out his mistake, he came and prostrated in front of the sage and asked for his forgiveness. The sage immediately forgave the king, but when he eventually died and went to the Yamaloka, he confronted God Yama, the god of death. He said, "Oh Yama, what mistakes have I done in my life that you made me suffer such?" And Yama had a ready answer. He said, "You tortured birds and insects by poking them with sticks when you were young." Mandavya tried to remember these days and understood that he had done it in the ignorance and innocence of childhood without understanding the implications of pain on those animals. He therefore made a deal with Yama that children under the age of 12 should not be held responsible for their actions and should be treated as juveniles. However, his anger at the extreme punishment he had received for such a small mistake was such that he cursed the god of death himself. He said, "O Dharma, O Yama, I curse you that you will be born as a mortal and understand how difficult life is for men and women. You will live an entire long life as a human and let me see how you live without making any mistakes." That curse was finally fulfilled in the Dwapara Yuga when sage Vyasa and the servant of Ambika, Parishrami, got together and created a child called Vidura. Therefore, this Vidura is a reincarnation of Lord Yama himself or Lord Dharma himself, and he became the advisor for Dhritarashtra. While Vidura is never considered a candidate for getting on the throne of Kuruvamsha, it was either Pandu or Dhritarashtra, even though Vidura was much more suited for the role. We see Vidura playing important roles along the way, whether it is warning the Pandavas to safety when they go to the Lakshagriha, or advising Dhritarashtra to control his son Duryodhana when he was getting out of hand, or listening to what Draupadi was saying and reacting to it when she was being insulted, or being responsible for Vidura Niti, which is considered to be almost at a level of Bhagavad Gita when it comes to advice given for humanity, Vidura plays a very important role along the way in the background, but is never considered ready for taking over the throne, because while Vyasa was his father, his mother was a lowly servant lady. When the Pandavas, along with Kunti, return back to Hastinapura and start staying there after Pandu's death, a bit of a rivalry starts between the cousins. Kripacharya became the teacher for both Pandavas and Kauravas. He was teaching them the usage of weapons and general behavior and etiquette and all of that. In time, Bhishma will find a better teacher, but for now, Kripa is their main acharya and the guru for all the brothers. Duryodhana was actually happy for the longest time when his uncle Pandu and his children were far away from him, and he had a strong feeling that after his father, he would take over the kingdom. But when Pandu died and the children returned back, there was a question now. Because originally, Dhritarashtra was the one who was unfit to rule, Pandu was put on the throne as the king, and Pandu's eldest son was also the eldest of all the cousins, which meant in a succession battle, the chances of Yudhishthira taking over were much higher. With Kunti and her sons back in Hastinapura, the 100 Kauravas and the 5 Pandavas started living together. There was some childhood rivalry from the get-go. Bhima was the strongest of them all, and he was a bit of a bully as well. So when the Kauravas would climb the tree, maybe he would shake the tree and make them fall. If they got into a river to swim, he would hold them down until they almost drowned and then let them go. This is all done in good fun though, at least in Bhima's mind, but the Kauravas felt bullied and lived in fear pretty much all the time. So, when a chance presented itself, Duryodhana actually planned to kill Bhima. He had Bhima's food poisoned. Unaware of this massive conspiracy, Bhima ate all the food, almost died, and fell into a river nearby. All the people who were playing that day, all the children, they went back home without realizing that Bhima is missing. Yudhishthira was a bit worried, but Bhima used to roam around by himself. They all decided to wait a little longer. When Bhima did not come back, everybody got worried, Kunti included. What had happened was Bhima, when he had fallen into the river, got bitten by snakes. The poison in his body, because of the food he had eaten, and the poison that the snakes put into his veins counteracted each other, and like they say, poison cuts poison, and Bhima escaped. He swam ashore, and they say the poison in his veins from the snakes actually made him more powerful and overall resistant to poison in future. When Duryodhana saw that his plan has been foiled, he got doubly angry. But Yudhishthira got a little careful now. When he went and talked to Vidura about it, Vidura advised Yudhishthira that he should be careful and not make all this publicly known, because Duryodhana may overreact and do something even worse. Everybody was advised to be extremely careful around Duryodhana. So now we observe Duryodhana and Bhima's rivalry has already started. Bhima was a bully. There's no denying that. But Duryodhana was downright evil. Now, there is a theory in recent times which talks about how You become the average of the 5 people that you surround yourself with. In his childhood and for the longest time during his adolescence and adulthood, Duryodhana was surrounded by his evil brother Dushasana, his evil uncle Shakuni, his blind by hatred father Dhritarashtra, Karna, who had a grudge against Pandavas and others. And that is what Duryodhana slowly became. Whereas, while Bhima might have started his life as a bully, in time he became much better and was able to control his emotions and his nature and behavior, owing to the fact that he was surrounded by the likes of Arjuna and Yudhishthira and Krishna and Kunti and others. If Bhima was surrounded by similar evil minded people, who knows what would have happened? In months and years to come, we will see Bhima plays the most significant role in Pandavas owing to his strength. All the brothers almost entirely depend upon Bhima to be able to help them, support them, and safeguard them in times of need until they reach a point where Draupadi enters their lives. Bhima is quite literally the hero of the story. The first level of education of the children is now complete, and the king Dhritarashtra has set up an arena to exhibit or showcase how much his children and his brothers' children have learned. Kripacharya, the teacher, is showing off these young princes and how much he has taught them. And in this exhibition of various skills, Arjuna seems to be doing really good in archery. Bhima seems to be doing really well in Malla Yuddha or one-to-one fight or in Gada. Although Duryodhana is quite equal to Bhima's might in this. The whole crowd that has assembled from Hastinapura is cheering for Arjuna. And from out of that crowd emerges a young boy. He's got a glow on his face and a golden armor on his body. The golden earrings in his ears shine like the sun himself. Who is this boy? Everyone wonders. And he steps in the front and says, why is everybody cheering at Arjuna as if he has done something that no one else can do? I can beat him. I could even do better than him and show you a few things no one has shown so far. Kripacharya is cautiously impressed by the claims of the boy, and because he looks so royal, he asks him, who are you, O boy? What kingdom are you a prince of? At this, the boy's face wilts. He questions Kripacharya instead and says, would you ask a river which mountain it is coming from? Or would you use its water any case? Would you ask the flower which garden it has come from? Or would you put it on God without asking those questions? How does it matter where I have come from? Kripacharya is taken aback. That was a simple question. Why is this boy taking so long to answer it? Why is he evading the question? In time, Karna is able to showcase some of his skills, but before he is rudely stopped and told this is a showcase of skills of princes and commoners are not allowed. Duryodhana will have none of it. In a display of great moral fiber, Duryodhana steps up and announces for the world that if a royal lineage or the kingship of some kingdom is all that is needed to showcase here, I give my share of the Anga kingdom to this boy. From today, I crown him the king of Anga. Let him compete now. We still don't know who this boy is. In time, a charioteer named Adhiratha comes out of the crowd, very happy that his son has been crowned the king. Karna goes and falls at the feet of his father, and then everybody realizes this is the son of a charioteer, the Sarathi Putra. This boy is known as Vasushena, or more popularly as Karna. Karna is not just Arjuna's rival today in this arena. For the rest of his life, until his very death, his rivalry with Arjuna is going to be legendary. And as both Arjuna and Karna grow in strength, the world will wait and watch for that one day when they fight each other. That day is long in the future. Karna will grow along with Duryodhana as his friend and brother, not knowing that he is Kunti's son, the long lost son that Kunti's curiosity had given birth to. Adhiratha is Karna's father. Radha, Adhiratha's wife, is his mother. But they are adopted parents. Karna is called Radheya because he is Radha's son. How did he come to be adopted by them is an interesting story in and of itself. If you remember how Kunti had her first son with Surya when she was still an unwed teenager, you will remember that she had put a boy that was born in a basket and floated that basket in river Ganga and asked the goddess Ganga to promise to take care of that son. Ganga did take care of that son. And when she saw a couple, Adhiratha and Radha, praying on her banks for children, because they were not able to have their own, she made sure that that basket floated towards Radha and landed at her feet. Imagining that her prayers were answered, Radha adopts this child. She named that child Vasushena because she saw the child covered in expensive clothes, had a golden armor and golden earrings, and knew that the child had come from wealth. Vasushena literally means born to wealth. But in time, because of the brilliance of the earrings that he was born with, he started to be identified by that. And an earring is worn in an ear. The word for ear is literally Karna. And his ear being the highlight of his personality, this boy in time started being called Karna. He will, after multiple achievements, get new names, but that is a story for another day. Let's talk about Drona. Without getting too deep into etymology, Drona means a pot or one who's conceived in a pot. His father is Bharadwaja, and therefore he is also often referred to as Bharadwaja. Bharadwaj Muni was also his teacher, and in his ashrama, Drona was great friends with Drupada. Now, Drona and Drupada have spent years in Bharadwaja Muni's ashrama or Gurukula and learned everything that they are supposed to learn. And in this time, they have become great friends. In time, when the education is complete, or Snatakottara as it is called, Drupada goes back to his kingdom and starts ruling as the king. Before he leaves though, he says, everything that belongs to me, half of that is yours, Drona. Come whenever you want and claim this. Drona goes on his way. As a Brahmana, he is learning to live a frugal life. At one point, he decides it's time to visit his friend Drupada and call in the offer that he has been made. And when he reaches Drupada's kingdom and is escorted into the courts, he is in tatters. He has walked a long way, looks like a beggar, and Drupada almost refuses to recognize him. And when he does recognize him, he laughs when Drona says, "You promised half of your kingdom to me. He said, those were childhood promises. Are you still keeping stock of that? Drupada also said, for good measure, that friendship can only be in equals. Now leave. Filled with anger, driven by hatred and craving vengeance, Drona goes and meets Parashurama. Parashurama is this avatar of Vishnu, but he is also known as someone who will only teach Brahmanas on how to become warriors. Under his tutelage, Drona learns everything, and one day, as he is walking in a forest, he chances upon something that his whole life changed from that point. A bunch of boys were playing with a ball, and that ball accidentally fell into a well. They tried their best but could not get the ball out. Drona, when he saw this, took his bow out, found some reed sticks, and hit the ball in the well with that reed stick. And upon that reed stick, he hit another and another and another until it reached the edge of the well where they were standing and slowly pulled the ball out. The kids were so happy, they went and informed Pitamaha Bhishma and said, we have found someone who was able to do this. And then Bhishma decided that this is the kind of teacher we need for these princes. Immediately, Drona gets the job of becoming the teacher or acharya, and from that day onwards, he will be known as Dronacharya. His desire for vengeance is still in him. It will change the very course of history, but that's a story for another day. Remember how Kripacharya used to be the teacher? Yeah, so Drona essentially replaced Kripacharya as the teacher of arts, and Kripa took on the role of the priest. Dronacharya is actually married to the sister of Kripacharya, known as Kripi. And Drona and Kripi have a child called as Ashwathama. This Ashwathama is another legendary character about whom we'll learn in detail. Right now, all we need to know is that Ashwathama is this wonderful child who has got a precious stone embedded into his forehead, and that is how he is famous. 105 young students surround their new master Drona. It's been months of education, and Drona is trying to test what they have learned. He's found a wooden bird which is placed above a branch on a tree, and he has made people stand age-wise and is asking each of them to take a shot at it. First, he summons Yudhishthira. He asks Yudhishthira, "What do you see?" The boy has got a bow and an arrow in his hand, and he says, "I see the beautiful tree, the flowers, the river that flows behind it, birds flying around, and I'm ready to strike." Drona says, "You will not be able to. Move aside." Surprised, Yudhishthira moves aside. Then Duryodhana is summoned, and he is asked the same question. "What do you see?" And Duryodhana replies, "Well, I see two groups, 5 of them standing on one side, 100 of us standing on the other side. I am leading this group, and I am ready to take my first shot at the bird." Drona tells Duryodhana, "You will not be able to hit. Move aside." Similarly, Bhima is called. He starts describing the smell emanating from the nearby kitchen, and Drona has had enough. He's now worried. Would anyone tell him what he's looking for? Arjuna is now summoned, and when Arjuna is asked, "What do you see?" Arjuna says, "Nothing." All the children start laughing, but Drona is cautiously interested. He says, "What do you mean nothing?" Arjuna says, "I see nothing except The bird whose neck I am supposed to sever? Drona is happy to listen to this answer. He asks, but what about the tree on which it is sat? What about the flowers that are blooming? What about the river that is flowing behind? The birds that are chirping around? Arjuna says, I see nothing. I see nothing except the bird whose neck I am supposed to sever. Drona is finally happy and he says, you can hit it. Take a shot. Arjuna puts his arrow on the bow, closes his left eye, takes aim, pulls the arrow to his ears and lets go. The arrow, flying in the sky, goes and hits its mark precisely. The neck of the bird severs and falls down. Drona turns to everyone and says, this is what I wanted to hear. The fact that Arjuna was the only one who could focus on the target that was given to him tells you that that is the way you succeed, by focusing. The young children have all learned a lesson today. Although Bhima and Duryodhana are not very happy about it, because even though they had given the wrong answer, maybe if the master had given them a chance, they might have hit it. Yudhishthira accepts this lesson with humility. All the other younger brothers are happy and everyone disperses, having learned a very, very important lesson in success. Focus. Drona is blossoming into a good teacher. His path to greatness is still ahead of him, but he's getting there. Arjuna, at least, is becoming a great archer. Drona is so happy with his progress that he makes a promise to Arjuna and says, I promise you, Arjuna, one day I will ensure you are the greatest archer in the world. This bond between Drona and Arjuna will remain till the very end of the epic. We'll see where the story goes, but the teacher and the student are inseparable, and the teacher keeps adding more and more value to the life of the student. This legendary story of focus leading to success has always been a mainstay of education in India. Young children, as early as possible, are taught this lesson that focus is the essential ingredient of success. But let's question that theory a little bit today. Is focus enough? It's necessary, but is it sufficient? As we read deeper into the Mahabharata, we almost immediately after this story come across another one which gives us a more powerful reason why Arjuna succeeded. Focus was there, sure, but there is something else. Drona has instructed the servants and cooks in the palace, rather strangely, that Arjuna should never be fed in complete darkness. Whenever he served food, it has to be either bright outside because of the sun, or a bright candle is to be lit in front of him. He should never eat in complete darkness. Now, one day, when a servant forgets to close the window, it's night, a gush of wind blows and extinguishes the candle that is lighting up Arjuna's room as he's eating his food. For one moment, before someone comes and lights up the candle, Arjuna is able to eat that morsel of food, and in the moment that it takes for him to eat the food, he stumbles upon a profound truth. He realizes if you have done something long enough and you have practiced it and you have muscle memory for it, you don't necessarily have to see to perform that job, because his hand knows the exact relative position of the plate to the mouth. He could eat without seeing the food or the dish upon which it is served. This simple truth opens up a lot of ideas in his mind. At night, when everybody has gone to sleep, Arjuna is the only one who will stay up and practice. In pitch darkness, he will try and hit the target with his arrows. When his right hand is tired, he'll hit with his left hand, but he will keep practicing all night. Most archers have their dominant hand more powerful because of the action of shooting the arrow. Arjuna is the only one who practiced equally with both hands, and therefore one of his names is Savyasachi or ambidextrous. Now, this story is an illustration that while Arjuna and his focus was important in turning him from a young boy to a great archer, it was not enough. It was his perseverance when everyone else was sleeping, him putting the hard work necessary to make this work. That is what made him the greatest archer. And this is a lesson that we all must remember. Focus is good, but perseverance is what will make you the best. The education of the princes is continuing. Arjuna is well on his way to become the greatest archer, and the teacher, Drona, can't be prouder. One day, when all the princes are practicing, they hear the loud and painful yelping of their dog. That dog does not look to be in pain, but is also unable to close its mouth. As the yelping dog leads them towards the person who has filled its mouth with arrows, they discover a young tribal boy dressed in deerskin and practicing archery. When asked, very humbly, he says, "The dog was breaking my concentration while I was practicing archery. Even though I could not see the dog, using the direction of the sound, I was able to gauge where it was, and all I did was filled its mouth with arrows without hurting it, and it could no longer bark and break my concentration." Stunned, the princes go back, but Arjuna is in a very difficult mental state now. Here is a tribal boy who's able to do something that he, the would-be greatest archer in the world, cannot even fathom how to do. He runs straight to Dronacharya, his master, and says, "Come with me and I want you to meet someone." When Arjuna and Drona reach where this tribal boy is practicing archery, the young boy falls at Drona's feet. There is reverence in his eyes, and Arjuna is confused. Drona asks the boy, "Who taught you the art that you have just displayed?" And the boy says, "You have, master." Drona is confused. Arjuna is both confused and angry. Hadn't Drona just promised to make him the greatest archer ever? And look at him going around teaching other boys better than he knows himself. Drona now asks the boy, "How am I your master? I don't even know you." To which the boy replies, "Of course you don't know me. I knew you would never teach a Nishada boy like me, so I made a statue of yours, kept it in front of me, and used you as my master only in my heart, and learned everything by myself. As long as I knew I was working under your statue's observation, I was going to get good." Arjuna is a little relieved that Drona is not cheating him, at least, but Drona is astonished. He asks the tribal boy, "You consider me your master?" The boy says, "Yes." "You agree that everything you've learned considering me your guru?" The boy says, "Yes, I do." And Drona then says, "Then where is my Guru Dakshina? Where is the payment for what I have taught you?" The boy very reverentially and humbly says, "What do you want, O Guru?" And Drona, almost remorselessly, says, "I want the thumb of your right hand as Guru Dakshina." Heartbroken and stunned, but without letting that reflect on his face, the boy unsheaths a knife and cuts off his right thumb and gives it to Drona as Guru Dakshina. Picking that thumb up, Drona and Arjuna turn back and walk away. A young boy's jealousy, a master's ambition has destroyed something and taken away the greatness that this boy could have achieved. Without the right hand thumb, this boy will forever be known as Ekalavya, the one with only one thumb. We don't know what the consequences of Ekalavya's greatness could have been. But we know that a great career of a great archer was cut short mid-flight. Ekalavya is never once mentioned in Mahabharata again. But if you dig deeper into the Puranas, you will find out that Ekalavya makes one more appearance. There is a fight between his army and Lord Krishna, and Krishna personally kills him. If you dig deeper, you will find out that this Ekalavya is the son of the Nishada king Hiranyadhanu. And this Hiranyadhanu owes his allegiance and is the general in the army of the Magadha king Jarasandha. This Jarasandha, who is Krishna's uncle Kamsa's father-in-law, is Lord Krishna's sworn enemy and by extension is a grave danger to Pandavas. For whatever reason this was done, the cutting down of Ekalavya's thumb and ensuring he does not become as great an archer as Arjuna actually served the Pandavas well. But here's the thing. When this action was being done, it was done in bad faith. Neither Drona nor Arjuna, ostensibly, knew about the background of Ekalavya when this action was taken. So today, I leave you with a question. If the unintended consequences of a bad faith action turn out to be beneficial for the world, can the perpetrators of this action take credit for it? And does society owe them a debt of gratitude? The Crown Prince of Panchala, a young boy, has just joined the ashrama or the Gurukula of Bharadwaj Muni. His teacher's son, a young boy of his own age named Drona, is also part of the same Gurukula. For many a year, these two students, the young prince called Drupada and the young Brahmana called Drona, learn together. They become great friends. Because Drupada was the crown prince, the king to be, he had learned to be courteous with everyone. This boy named Drona was a little too close, and they spent a lot of time together. And in time, one day, Drupada made a promise to Drona that we are friends, we are equals. Whenever you want come, I will give you half my kingdom. Of course, he was jesting with the boy, because how can a king give away half a kingdom? But turns out, this boy, Drona, took it seriously. Many years after their education was done and they had gone their separate ways, almost forgotten about each other, one day, a Brahmana in tattered clothes arrived at Drupada's palace. That man was Drona, and he reminded Drupada, the king now, that he was supposed to give him half the kingdom. Drupada obviously thought this was laughable and said, "Who gives their half a kingdom away?" Laughed and asked the Brahmana to leave. Now, he did not know that Drona would hold a grudge. Life went on for Drupada. He went on to become a good king and was ruling his kingdom from his capital Panchala for a long time. Then one day, out of nowhere, a bunch of boys led by a prince called Arjuna attacked the kingdom of Drupada. They took the king hostage, dragged him to the feet of that same Brahmana, his friend from his Gurukula. This was so insulting, this was so embarrassing for Drupada. And then Drona had the audacity to tell him that I am going to cut your kingdom into half, take half of it, and now that we are equals, we can be friends. Sure, Drupada had mentioned casually that friendship is between equals. He did not realize Drona was going to go this far. He had imparted education to these Kaurava and Pandava princes and had used the strength of Arjuna and his cousins to conquer him. Obviously, Drona didn't hurt Drupada, physically at least, but mentally, Drupada was scarred. His kingdom broken into half, and that half not even being ruled by Drona, Drupada went back to his kingdom filled with vengeance. If Drona had assumed this is the way he was going to buy his friendship, Drupada was going to show him and avenge this insult. He took the name of Yagnasena, created a large yagna, and started performing a Putreshti yagna. Drupada wanted a boy who would avenge this insult, a boy who was born with a specific purpose of vanquishing and killing Dronacharya. The sacrifice, the yagna, was successful, and from the altar arose a boy. He was to be named Drishtadyumna, and he would avenge his father. But along with that brother, almost like a bonus, came another child, a girl this time. A girl who was not wanted, who was not asked for, and yet who was a twin of the Drishtadyumna, whose purpose was revenge. This girl was named Draupadi or Panchali or Yagnaseni, depending upon whether you knew her as the daughter of Drupada or the one who hailed from Panchali or the daughter of Yagnasena. This Draupadi would go on to change the very fabric of society in time. This boy, Drishtadyumna, was going to fulfill his father's desire for vengeance. Draupadi went on to marry Pandavas, thereby strengthening the two kingdoms and creating a force which would play a big role in the Mahabharata and change the very direction of the war. Drishtadyumna and Draupadi are not the only two children of Drupada. He had another child. She was born a girl and in time became a man. That story will be recounted in time to come, but the one connection that you need to be aware of is that this girl is the same Amba whom we have described in a previous video. According to many stories, it was Amba reborn as this girl. In some retellings, Amba's garland fell into this girl's neck. Then she decided to take vengeance on behalf of Amba. That girl is Shikhandini, who goes on to become the great warrior Shikhandi. This Shikhandi will be responsible eventually for the fall of Bhishma. So if you think about it, Drupada's two children are responsible for the fall and death of two of the greatest supporters of the Kaurava army, two legendary warriors, Bhishma and Drona. We will delve into these stories when the time for them arrives. Now that the education of the Pandavas and Kauravas was almost complete, a lot of villagers started talking about who should be the next king. One has to understand that Dhritarashtra was never meant to be a full-time king. He was only taking care of the kingdom until someone was ready. Originally, he was denied the throne because of his blindness, and that had not changed. The only two potential candidates now were Duryodhana and Yudhishthira, and most villagers were very clear in their mind that Yudhishthira was the most qualified for this. Openly, they would talk about how Dhritarashtra needs to step down now that Yudhishthira is ready. And because Bhishma, because of his own vow, will not be ascending the throne, the only one really qualified was Yudhishthira. Duryodhana, of course, being a Duratma or an evil character, was never in the running in the minds of the villagers or the citizenry at least. Duryodhana didn't like this one bit. Along with Shakuni and Karna, he made some plans. He went and told his father, this has gone too far, and if this is not checked, Yudhishthira will end up becoming the king, and it was just a matter of time that Dhritarashtra and all his sons would be kicked out and would live like beggars. Now, Dhritarashtra truly believed that Yudhishthira was a good person. He had inherited goodness and dharma from his father Pandu, but he got talked into this by Duryodhana. Duryodhana's plan was to send the Pandava brothers along with mother Kunti to a place called Varanavata. Now, there had to be a reason because of which Pandavas would be sent. Otherwise, everybody would think that they are being banished. As suggested by Duryodhana, Dhritarashtra and others started talking about how Varanavata is this amazing place where a large festival was being organized for Lord Pashupati or Shiva. In time, the Pandavas were very excited to go and visit the place. Now that the interest was created, Duryodhana asked Purochana, the minister, to go and do something else. He explained to Purochana that this is the time when he had to show his real loyalty to himself, and when he, that is Duryodhana, became the king, Purochana would be amply rewarded for it. Purochana went ahead and started building a palace, a doomed palace for Pandavas. He used all sorts of material. He used hemp, he used dry wood, he filled up the plastering with ghee and other fats which were easy to burn, and then covered the entire palace with lak. Now, this lak is a substance that burns with a fury, but it's not easy to identify that something inflammable is being used. Eventually, when the Pandavas decided to leave for Varanavata, the palace was almost built. Now, as they were leaving, Vidura came and in front of everyone said something really strange. By itself, it makes no sense, and to be honest, even the Pandava brothers and Kunti did not understand what was being said, but Yudhishthira understood. Vidura said to Yudhishthira, "One who knows will act so as to avoid danger. There is a sharp weapon that can pierce the body, but it is not made of iron. He who knows this is not killed and can turn it against the enemy. The burner of grass and the dryer of dew do not kill animals in holes. He who protects himself through knowledge lives. The blind man doesn't see the way because the blind man has no sense of direction. He who doesn't have perseverance is never prosperous. Know this and be alert. He who accepts an ironless weapon from the untrustworthy can escape from the fire like a porcupine. Through traveling, a man gets to know the way, and from stars can deduce the directions. He who keeps the fives under self-control is never oppressed by the enemy." It made no sense to any of the Pandava brothers or Kunti, and in fact Kunti came and asked Yudhishthira, "You nodded to what Vidura said and said you understood. If it's not too much of a problem, can you explain to me what it was?" Yudhishthira said, "I understood what he said, and for you, just suffice to know that we are in danger from fire and poison, and that we are supposed to escape through a tunnel." Eventually, they reach the palace and they get settled in it. It looks like a good place from outside, but because Yudhishthira is aware and he has informed everyone that a fire may be set to this palace any day, they always lived in fear and in alertness. One day, a miner came to talk to Yudhishthira and said, "Vidura has sent me and he has asked me to help you build a tunnel." In a lot of translations, the Laksha Griha is called the palace of wax. Laksha or lak or lac, as it is called, is not really wax. These days, of course, wax is made from petroleum and other products, but back in the day, wax meant beeswax. Whereas lak is basically lacquer. It's a sort of resin that is secreted by lac insects. The one that is cultivated for this specifically these days and back in the days, the scientific name for that is Keria lacca. And the reason it is called lac or laksha is so intuitive, and yet most of us miss it, is laksha quite literally comes from the word laksha or lakh, which is 100,000. The idea being, you need a lac of these insects to be able to create this lacquer or resin. Even today, obviously, lac is highly cultivated, even though there are synthetic lacs available now, but the resin secreted from the insects is still highly in demand. It's used to make ornaments, and it's used to make a lot of models which are quite difficult to make and therefore are used as expensive gifts. The Pandavas are living in abject terror. They are worried Purochana will set fire to the house any day now. They don't trust the miner who has come and said he is here to build a tunnel. The miner has to convince them by reminding that he is aware of what Vidura has said to Yudhishthira while they left Hastinapura. And when trust is established, the miner is now allowed to start digging the tunnel. He starts at the center of the house and digs straight down and then starts extending it towards the forest. Now, at all times, the mouth of the tunnel is covered with wooden planks so that Purochana does not know. This minister, Purochana, he is sleeping at the doors to ensure that the Pandavas never get to escape. While the Pandava brothers are allowed to hunt during the day, Kunti is almost a prisoner in this house. One day, when there is a large celebration, a lot of guests arrive. With them comes a family, led by a Nishada woman and her 5 children, and it looks almost like a replica of the Pandava family. Bhima decides this is the time, and the Nishada family becomes the unfortunate collateral damage in this plot. The brothers, with their mother, escape through the tunnel, set fire to the house. Purochana, who was responsible for building every inch of it and turned it into an inflammable inferno, burns with it. The Pandavas have gotten out of the tunnel and reached the forest. But the villagers in Varnavata have understood the plot. They blame Dhritarashtra and even go so far as to say Bhishma, Drona, Vidura, all of them were involved in this plot to kill the Pandava children. In time, when the fire is put out in the morning, they realize charred bodies are found. The miner, who is also among the villagers to enter the burnt house, has ensured that he closes the mouth of the tunnel so no one finds out that Pandavas have actually escaped. The Kaurava family, led by Dhritarashtra and Duryodhana, come and perform the funeral rites for the bodies of what they think are Pandavas. Dhritarashtra spends a lot of riches and gives away a lot of dana to ensure that he suitably honors the memory of his brother's children. He announces in front of everyone, teary-eyed, that finally my brother and all his children are dead. The race of Pandu is over. Little does he know that the Pandavas are going to make a comeback very soon. In the forest, the Pandavas are suffering even more. And we see this suffering through the eyes of the strongest Pandava, Bhima. He is the one who realized within no time as they had walked through the forest that all of them are tired and cannot walk anymore. They are suffering from thirst also. So Bhima picks up his mother and puts her on his shoulder. He picks up the twins, Nakula and Sahadeva, and carries them on his hips. He picks up Yudhishthira and Arjuna and carries both of them in his arms, and carrying this much load, he is somehow able to walk faster than all of those people when they were walking by themselves. There's no time to stop, there's no time to pause. He runs and runs and runs, and in the middle of the forest, finally, when they're ready to rest, they realize that they're all thirsty and there's no water to be found. It's Bhima who once again goes and finds water for them. He has taken charge of protecting the family. And as they are sleeping, Bhima stays up and keeps a guard as well. He looks at his mother and his brothers who are sleeping on the ground and wonders what sins have they committed that they suffer so much. Kunti, his mother, who should be sleeping on beds made of velvet, is sleeping in dirt. Yudhishthira, the most dharmic person around, who should be king, is running around from people who are chasing to kill him. Arjuna, the greatest warrior in the world, is hiding and suffering. Nakula Sahadeva, the young brothers who should be pampered, are being subjected to this dark and dangerous forest. Bhima looks around and finds there is a village nearby, and he decides, as they wake up in the morning and drink some water, he will then once again carry them to that village, and that's where they will hide for a little longer. Unknown to them, two Asura siblings are watching them and thinking of turning them into their food. Kunti and her four sons are sleeping. One of them, the strongest of them all, is lying awake and sitting up, guarding his mother and his brothers. Far away on a tree stands Hidimba, the Rakshasa who is in charge, almost the king of this forest. He smells human flesh after a long time. He sends his sister Hidimba to check upon the prey that has wandered into his forest. He tells her, "Kill all of them and bring them to me. I am tired of eating animal flesh. My tongue craves for the taste of human flesh today." Hidimba, the sister, climbs down from the tree and goes and checks upon 5 sleeping humans and 1 staying up. Bhima, the powerful one with muscles built like trunks of trees, the one who looks so handsome that she falls for him immediately. Desire overtakes her, and she is no longer interested in hurting him or his people. She asks him, "Who are you, O human, who has wandered into this forest of ours? Are you not aware that this is not a safe place to be in, and any moment my brother will come down and kill all of you? It was my job to do so, but since I have fallen in love with you, I propose that you and I get married. You wake up your brothers, and your mother will carry all of them to safety, and we will live far away and safe from Hidimba." Bhima laughs at her and says, "While I might be interested to marry you, it does not mean that I am going to wake up my tired and sleeping brothers and mother. Let your brother come, let him fight me, and you will see who I am. I am the powerful Bhima, and I am not afraid of any Rakshasa." This takes a while. So frustrated, Hidimba climbs down from the tree and understands in a moment what has happened between his sister and this man. Hidimba says, "I am going to kill you first, sister, one who hobnobs with humans who are our food." Hidimba once again asks Bhima, "Now is the time, wake them up, sit on my shoulders, and I will fly you away to safety." But before any of that happens, Hidimba attacks Bhima. Bhima is not afraid for one moment. They fight and fight and fight. Bodies clash with each other. Trees are uprooted. Rocks are thrown at each other. Flesh is rended from body. Blood trickles everywhere. And all this noise finally wakes up the brothers who have been sleeping. Arjuna picks up his bow and arrows and says, "Move aside, brother, and I will kill this Rakshasa in a moment." Yudhishthira offers help, and so do Nakula and Sahadeva. But Bhima will have none of it. After a long time, he has found an opportunity to actually fight and then be able to mortally kill someone. All his fights up to this point have been fake fights. When someone surrenders, the fight stops. This is a mortal fight, and Bhima will have no interference. In time, Bhima kills Hidimba. As the dead body of her brother is lying in front of her, Hidimba is still overcome by desire for Bhima. She has a word with Kunti and then expresses her love for Bhima and her desire to marry him. Yudhishthira says, take him along, keep him with you for as long as you want, but only during the night. In the day, please bring him back. This goes on for weeks and months, and eventually Hidimba has a son with Bhima. In the Rakshasas, the babies are born the moment the conception happens, which means a young boy is born to Hidimba immediately with all the powers that the mother already has. His head is shining like a pot, like a ghata, and therefore they decide to name him Ghatotkacha. After a few months of this, the Pandavas no longer want to stay in the same forest for safety and want to roam around and stay away from Duryodhana's assassins. Hidimba and Ghatotkacha make a promise to Bhima and says, whenever you need us, just think of us and we will be there. It is said that Indra has created Ghatotkacha as the one to fight against Karna in a battle that is far, far away from today. We'll see how that unfolds in another story another day. The brothers leave the forest known as Hidimbavana and roam around in forests in many kingdoms. In the kingdoms of Matsya, Trigarta, Kichaka, Panchala, they roam around, usually hidden, sometimes in the open. One day, they are confronted by Vedavyasa. Vedavyasa has a word with Yudhishthira and says, I knew that son of Dhritarashtra, he would never let you stay in peace, and I'm upset that Dhritarashtra banished you from his kingdom and you walk around in fear for your life. I'll suggest a place known as Ekachakra. Go settle there. That is a safe place for you. Do not move from there. Stay hidden. One day I will come back and I will tell you the next step. So slowly, Pandavas and the mother move into safe Ekachakra, not knowing that another Rakshasa laid in wait for them in the city of Ekachakra. After killing Hidimba and based on Vyasa's advice, Kunti and her 5 sons go settle in Ekachakra. They're living a life of incognito where they're pretending to be Brahmanas and begging food to survive. They're living in a Brahmana's house, behind a potter's house, away from the eyes of people who might wonder who they are. Now, Bhima is never fully satisfied with the amount of food that the brothers are collecting. While all of them go and beg for food and collect it all in one place, Bhima eats fully 1/2 of the collected food, and the mother and the other 4 brothers survive on the remaining half. And yet, it is Bhima who is still unsatisfied with the food that he is getting. One day, when the 4 brothers have gone to beg, Bhima is keeping company with Kunti, ostensibly because based on how strong Bhima looks, people probably refuse to give him alms, expecting him to work and earn a living. As they are sitting at home, they hear lamentations coming out of the Brahmana's house in which they are living. Kunti rushes towards the house of the Brahmanas with a care which is similar to how a cow would display towards her calves. She eavesdrops on the conversation and understands that something terrible has happened. The Brahmana seems to be saying that he is ready to sacrifice his own life so that his wife and his 2 children can survive. He says it is the duty of the husband to protect his family, and since he is unable to do so, the best he can do is to sacrifice his own life. The wife seems to be arguing back with the husband and saying that If the husband is dead, how will she be able to protect the two children? So for the safety of the children in the future, it is best if she dies. The daughter, who is still a very young girl, not having reached adulthood, says, one day you are going to get me married and send me away from home any case. I am not going to be of any use to you when I am an adult because I will be living with my husband. Might as well go now and die instead. It's only the young boy, a toddler, who picks up a blade of grass and says, no one has to die. I will go and kill that Asura who is trying to kill our family. Kunti can sustain this suspense no longer and barges in on this small moment of levity when the kid says this and everybody is smiling. She asks them, what is the reason for this sorrow, for this grief? And they explain how they made the biggest mistake of their lives by settling down in Ekachakra, where the king was a weakling. The kingdom was terrorized by an Asura called Bakasura, who, on guarantee of protecting the villages from the attacks from other kings and other Asuras, made a deal with the king. The deal was this: every month, one family had to send a cart full of rice, 2 buffaloes, and 1 human being, all of which would be consumed by Bakasura. And if any month this was not sent, Bakasura would attack and create havoc. So the king decided that every month, one family will be randomly chosen and they have to take care of this and sacrifice one person from their family along with the food. It happened so that this month was the turn of this Brahmana household. The Brahmana, while lamenting, was also scolding his wife, saying it was her fault that they were stuck in Ekachakra. The house that they were living in was the wife's ancestral property, and while her mother and father and relatives lived there, she didn't want to leave the village in spite of being aware of the threat from Bakasura. In time, her father and mother passed away, and all the relatives passed away also, and yet they continued staying in Ekachakra, thinking they've been safe this long and they might be safe for the rest of their lives. However, now that the danger was upon them, there was nothing left to do but to decide who was going to die. Kunti offered solace and said, you have given us help and support when we needed it the most. I have 5 children and I am willing to sacrifice one of them so that your family remains whole. The Brahmana would have none of it. He said, you are our guests. How can we ask you to die in our place? Who said anything about dying? Said Kunti. Have you seen my son? He could take 4 Bakasuras in battle all by himself. Don't worry about this. We will take care of this. You just arrange the food and the 2 buffaloes. While this was being done, the 4 brothers who had gone out to beg returned. Yudhishthira was very, very angry with his mother that she was willing to sacrifice one of her own children to pay for the services offered by the Brahmana. Kunti explained that no one is sacrificing anything. Bhima will prevail. Don't you remember how he was able to beat Hidimba single-handedly? In time, the arrangements are made and happily Bhima travels with the cart towards the cave where Bakasura lived. The place was scattered with the bones and skulls of humans which had been consumed by the Asura. Bhima reached the mouth of the cave, shouted for Bakasura by his name and started eating the cart full of food that was arranged for the Asura. When Bakasura came out, he could not believe his eyes. He had not imagined any human brave enough to call him by his name, let alone eat the food that was meant for him. He challenged Bhima and asked, who are you who dares to eat the food that is meant for me? Bhima did not even bother to look up. Bakasura threw a huge boulder at him from the cave. Bhima brushed it aside with his left hand and continued eating. Bakasura threw a huge tree. Bhima brushed that aside too, never once looking up or even acknowledging the presence of the Asura. Bakasura had had enough. This disrespect he could not handle. He charged towards Bhima in full might. Bhima had by then finished all the food that was meant for Bakasura, set the two buffaloes free, picked up the cart and smashed Bakasura's chest with it. A fight began in earnest. The whole earth shook. They say as Bakasura and Bhima uprooted trees and threw it at each other, the entire forest risked becoming barren. The fight went on for a long time, and soon Bhima was tired. Not tired of fighting with Bakasura, tired of staying there. The next moment, he smashed Bakasura's head in, and in one quick swoop, Bakasura fell and died. Bhima returned back to the house where his mother and brothers were staying. The Brahmana rejoiced. The family rejoiced. The entire village and kingdom rejoiced. But now they were stuck with another fear. A man who could kill an Asura, that had to be Bhima. They were now worried Duryodhana might find out and send assassins to hurt the Pandavas and Kunti. How do they escape from this? That's a story for another day. An interesting conversation that happens between Kunti and the Brahmana is about living in a kingdom ruled by a bad king. The biggest lamentation that the Brahmana has is that he decided to live in the kingdom of a king who was a weakling and who did not care for the welfare of his citizens. Instead of collecting his army and hunting down the Asura who was troubling all the people in his kingdom, he decided to make a deal and cut short his own responsibilities. He sacrificed the people, and the one responsibility that the king has, which is the most important, to protect the people of his land, he almost outsourced that to the Asura. The Brahmana talks about three things that any human needs to do to remain happily. He says, one must first try and pick a kingdom ruled by a good king. He says, I made a mistake in that. Then one must find a good spouse and marry in good time. He says, by marrying a woman who was living in this kingdom, he made a mistake. While he did not regret his choice of spouse, he did regret the timing and the place where he got married. And the third thing, he says, is that one must work towards attaining a lot of wealth. And in his pursuit of only knowledge, he never tried to attain money, and that is a regret that he carried. So, the right kingdom, the right spouse, and a decision to make wealth. These are the three things the Brahmana says that are important for pursuit of a happy life, and he says he failed in all of them. It's midnight in Mathura. Vasudeva and Devaki are lying in a prison, afraid of what is going to happen next. Devaki is having a child, their 8th child. The 7 before this one have been killed by Kamsa, who's Devaki's own brother. Just as the child is born, a sort of dreamy silence spreads over the prison, and all the guards go to sleep. The doors open by themselves. Vasudeva picks up the newborn child whose cries have not awoken anyone. He puts the child in a basket, and after letting Devaki get one last look at the child, he carries it away. The prison doors are open. It is raining heavily, and Yamuna is almost flooding. Vasudeva has put the child in a basket, placed the basket on his head, and has carried it far away into Gokula. He leaves the child with Yashoda and Nandaraja, the promise that they will take care of this foster child. This child, because of his dark skin, is going to be named Krishna. Kamsa finds out that the 8th child has escaped and starts sending Asura after Asura to find out and kill that child. First comes Putana, who tries to feed the infant Krishna poisoned milk. Krishna kills her. Then comes Shakata, the Asura in the form of a toy. Krishna kills him too. Then comes Trinavarta, the one in the form of a tornado, and he gets killed too. One day, Krishna eats some mud, and when Mother Devaki tries to take that mud out of his mouth and asks him to open his mouth wide, she sees the entire cosmos the entire universe in there. When Krishna is being naughty and his mother tries to tie him with a rope, he runs with the stone mortar that he is tied to and breaks two large trees and sets free Nalakubera and Manigriva. But when the attacks do not stop, Nanda Maharaj decides to move from Gokula and go to Vrindavana. The attacks still don't stop. Krishna kills Baka, the bird, Agha, the serpent, and Vatsa, the calf, all of these asuras who have been sent to kill him. Then comes Dhenuka, whom he ends with Balarama. And then it's the turn of the multi-headed snake Kaliya. Kaliya has been spreading poison in the waters of Yamuna, and Krishna jumps into the river, kills Kaliya, and dances upon his many heads. One day, when the people of Vrindavana are planning to create a large sacrifice and worship Lord Indra for good rains, Krishna cautions them and reminds them that the rain comes because of Govardhana Parvata, or the hill, and says you should instead worship the hill. Upset with this decision, when Indra rains and causes a flood to drown Vrindavana, Krishna shows another Leela, picks up the Govardhana Giri and holds it up so that everybody can live safely under it. After many weeks of this, Indra finally accepts defeat and comes down and gives him the name Govinda. This is also the time when he performs the famous Rasa Leela with gopis. In time, Akrura comes and takes Krishna and Balarama to Mathura. This is for the famous bow sacrifice. And when the sacrificial bow is being paraded across the town, Krishna picks it up and breaks it into many pieces. Enraged, when an elephant is sent to tackle him, he kills the elephant, and then the terrible warrior named Chanura is killed in Malla Yuddha or single combat. Another warrior called Mushtika is now killed by Balarama, who's accompanied Krishna to Mathura. In time, Krishna kills Kamsa, his own uncle, sets the town of Mathura free from the tyranny of this king, and crowns Ugrasena, his grandfather, as king. He is now at an age where, with Balarama and many other students, he attends the Gurukula. He goes to Guru Sandipini's ashrama and learns about the Shastras and Shastra. In time, the Magadha king Jarasandha, who's very angry with how his son-in-law Kamsa has been killed, sends an army to attack Mathura. Krishna and his army defeat King Jarasandha's army and sends it back. But Jarasandha does not give up. He sends his army again and again and again. 17 times this happens. 17 times Krishna wins. But the body count is rising in Mathura. And Krishna will not have innocent people die. So with Balarama and many other Yadavas, he makes the long journey from Mathura to Dwaraka, and on the banks of that ocean, he sets up a new kingdom. This is where the Yadavas flourish. So now we are all caught up on what's been happening with Krishna. The Mahabharata does not tell all the stories chronologically. The childhood stories or the Balya Leela of Krishna are barely mentioned in Mahabharata. We see Krishna as a full-grown adult already. There is an additional book, an appendix to Mahabharata, so to speak, Harivamsha. And this book is where you get to see a lot of what happened to Krishna during his childhood and his adolescence. Similarly, the Mahabharata never tells us the story of Drupada immediately after Drona. Even in this series, you have seen me recount the story of Drupada as if it was told in Mahabharata chronologically, except now when the Pandavas are starting to go towards Panchala from Ekachakra, this is where there is a parva called Chitraratha Parva, in which they learn about what happened to Drupada after he was insulted by Drona. Similarly, the story of Amba, which many people tell in the retelling of Mahabharata chronologically, is actually recounted many Parvas later, just before the war begins in the Bhishma Parva. And finally, Karna's story is never once mentioned in Mahabharata until the war is actually over. So, till Karna dies, he is presented as the villain and the bad guy. It's only after Karna is dead and his funeral rites are to be performed are we told the story of the good he has done in this world. So it's become fashionable these days to present Karna as an out and out villain, although that is not true according to Mahabharata. He was a complex character and there is good and bad on both sides. After Bakasura is dead, the Pandavas and Kunti continue living in the Brahmana's house for a little longer. In time, another Brahmana comes to this house and he tells a lot of interesting stories to the Pandavas. This is when they find out about Drupada, the king who was insulted by Drona, and how he goes and seeks a child who will avenge him and kill Drona. Here also, we hear for the first time how Drona, who was insulted by Drupada first, went and spoke to Parshurama, requested his weapons and his knowledge, and using that, he sought revenge. Both these stories have already been covered. In time, Vyasa comes to meet the Pandavas. He tells of a girl in a past era who could not find a good husband and prayed to Shiva long and hard. Happy with her penance, Shiva came and offered her a boon. She was so excited on seeing Shiva. She said, I want a good husband. 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 She could not control her own emotions and said this 5 times. And Shiva said, sure, you will get 5 husbands who will love you. She tries to take it back and says, that's not what I meant. I was just excited to get a really good, virtuous husband. And Shiva says, a boon once granted has to be fulfilled, and one day you will find 5 husbands who will all love you. That said, Vyasa informs the Pandavas that Drupada, the king of Panchala, is performing a Swayamvara for his daughter Draupadi. He tells the Pandavas, you should go and seek her hand. So, all the 5 Pandavas start towards Panchala. On the way, they meet a Gandharva called Chitraratha. So, this Parva is also called as Chitraratha Parva. They enrage the Gandharva and a battle ensues between Chitraratha on one side and Arjuna on the other. After a lot of war of words, there's a real battle with weapons. Arjuna uses Agneya weapon and sets fire to Chitraratha's chariot. Defeated, Chitraratha, a Gandharva, could not believe he was defeated by Brahmanas. So he sought information about who they were and come to know that they are indeed Pandavas. Now Pandavas have been holding this information quiet for a long time, but they see no fear from someone who has just been vanquished, so they tell their real identity to him. This Gandharva requests Arjuna to give him the Agneya weapon that he was defeated with. In exchange, the Gandharva offers something called a Chakshushi, which is another weapon. Now, friendship being forged by exchange of divine weapons, the Gandharva sets to tell a lot of interesting stories to these people. He tells how the Pandavas are also called Tapatya, as in the children of Tapati. And there's a long story about how this came to be. He also talks about a very interesting and long story about how sage Vasishtha and Vishwamitra became mortal enemies. This is the story of the stealing of the cow and the other things that come with it. They continue their journey towards Panchala once more, and along the way, they find a group of Brahmanas who are going there. These Brahmanas inform that there is a priest that they need to go and appoint as their family priest. This priest is Dhaumya, who will remain the Pandava family priest for the rest of time. Eventually, they reach Panchala. Panchala is decorated like a bride because in there is the most beautiful woman, Draupadi, Krishna, Panchali, Yagnaseni. The Swayamvara of this girl is being conducted, which means she gets to choose who her husband is. Drupada, Draupadi's father, has set up a test. The person who succeeds in this test will win Draupadi's hand. For the longest time, after his defeat by Arjuna, Drupada has always wanted his daughter to marry Arjuna. Someone who could take a king down single handedly was a worthy son in law. Now, the test has been set up in such a way that only Arjuna can succeed in it, but Drupada also knows that the Pandava brothers have burned and perished in the house of lack. The test still remains though. In time, Drishtadyumna comes and announces the beginning of the test. There is a very heavy bow, and someone has to tie the bowstring to the bow, pick it up, look in the reflection of a tray full of oil, and hit the eye of a fish which is rotating 50 feet above. Hundreds and hundreds of princes from all around the world have come. Everyone tries and everyone fails. This is also a place where typically the story is told about how Draupadi said no to Karna. In the critical edition of Mahabharata, there is no such mention. Karna does participate in it and is unsuccessful in hitting the target. When all the Kshatriyas have tried and failed, up rises a Brahmana. Arjuna rises up. Two sets of people are simultaneously watching this. The Kshatriyas, who have all failed, start laughing at the audacity of a Brahmana to even consider attempting this. And the Brahmanas are worried that this young boy is going to get all of them insulted because of his insolence. Arjuna walks towards the bow, picks it up, and starts pulling at the bowstring. What happens next? That is a story for another day. There's an interesting thing that I thought I should share regarding Swayamvara. Pretty much all weddings are talked about as Swayamvara, where the bride has the choice to pick whoever she wants for her husband. However, Draupadi's Swayamvara, even though it is called that in many occasions in the Mahabharata itself, is not truly a Swayamvara. It is another kind of wedding called Virya Shulka. Virya Shulka is quite literally payment for displaying bravery or courage or valor. Now, the idea being anybody who is able to display the kind of bravery that is required to win the girl would then also be able to protect her and safeguard her, because in a Swayamvara, typically what used to happen is that when a girl selects a boy, the others who have traveled thousands of leagues would get upset, and this would turn into a brutal fight between all her suitors. The father does not want someone picked by the girl also to be a weakling who will not be able to defend her when eventually the Kshatriyas will try and take revenge. So the idea was, while there is still a concept of choosing by herself, there is a criteria that this person has to be powerful and valorous enough to even qualify for her to pick.
When all the Kshatriyas had failed, Arjuna, though dressed as a Brahmana, makes the attempt and succeeds. He hits the target. Drupada is overjoyed. So is Draupadi and Drishtadyumna. And the father, King Drupada, announces the close of the contest, and Draupadi puts the garland around Arjuna's neck. Now, the Kshatriyas who have been there for a long time and who have been waiting for one of them to win are really upset about it. And murmurs of a fight begin to emerge. Yudhishthira and the twins Nakula and Sahadeva decide to leave and walk towards where their mother is. Only Arjuna and Bhima are left now, and in earnest a fight begins. Shalya of the Madra kingdom attacks Bhima. A fight ensues and Bhima summarily picks him up bodily and throws him to the ground and defeats Shalya. Karna is attacking Arjuna and is surprised at how well the Brahmana is able to keep up with Karna's might. He's so astonished by the Brahmana's performance that he asks if the Brahmana is indeed Parashurama in disguise. Fighting him makes one wonder if he is Dhanurveda, the science of warfare personified. Arjuna says he has just learned what he knows from his preceptor and he is fighting to the best of his ability. Karna, if he had known it was Arjuna, would have hated him. But since he does not, there is a sort of respect that grows in Karna for Arjuna about his skill. Now, in the same Swayamvara, there is Krishna and Balarama and all the Yadavas who have traveled all the way from Dwarka. Krishna is immediately able to identify the two brothers as Arjuna and Bhima. In fact, he tells Balarama that the three people who have left, I believe the mild one was Yudhishthira, the ones who looked beautiful and handsome were Nakula and Sahadeva respectively, and the one who is wielding the bow and arrow is Arjuna, and the one who was able to pluck a whole tree out and smash the Kshatriyas with it has to be Bhima. Krishna then goes on to convince all the Kshatriyas to not be sore losers. He tells them that you all had a chance and failed, and only then the Brahmana was given the chance. Don't be sore losers and let them go. Arjuna and Bhima slowly lead the bride, Draupadi, from the palace along the streets towards the house where her mother and three brothers are living. Drishtadyumna, Krishna and Balarama, though separately, follow the brothers and Draupadi. As they enter, Kunti, the mother, who was a little worried about what plight might have befallen her children, is busy in praying to the god for the safety of her children. And when Arjuna announces that, look what we have brought for you, mother, without turning back, she says, enjoy what you have received amongst each other and be happy. When she turns and sees that this is a girl and not food that they have brought as usual, she is scandalized. She says, I should not have said that. What do we do now? She goes and asks Yudhishthira, and Yudhishthira says, what you have said is not right, mother. Arjuna has won her fair and square, and therefore he should be the only one who marries her. Now Arjuna says that I will be committing a sin if I marry before my elder brother does. So I will not fall into that sin, and therefore, even though I have won her, I want you to marry her. Draupadi is standing there and listening to all of this and says nothing. And when Yudhishthira looks around and sees that all the brothers, including himself, are equally attracted towards Draupadi, he worries that it is possible that in time the unity of the brothers may be broken if only one of them marries the princess. So Yudhishthira announces for everyone that all five of them will have to marry her. Kunti, though happy with the agreement that they have all come to, is not convinced and takes Draupadi to another room, and Kunti and Draupadi spend the night away from the brothers, talking amongst each other, coming to some conclusion. Now, before the nightfall happens, something else has happened though. Krishna and Balarama, who've been following the brothers, now make an entry and say, we have identified you. And Yudhishthira is confused. How did you identify who we were? He asks Krishna, and Krishna says, fire, even though it is covered, can still be identified by the heat it emanates. You brothers, even though you hide yourself as Brahmanas, it is easy to identify you because of the valor and bravery and courage you displayed in Drupada's palace. Saying this, Krishna and Balarama wish them all the best and leave for Dwarka. Now in all this, Drishtadyumna, who has been following, he hears all of this, goes back and reports to his father that indeed Draupadi is going to marry all 5 of them. A sort of a dharma sankata evolves. Kshatriyas have always have polygamy, as in one man marrying multiple women. But there have been no known cases of polyandry, which is one woman marrying multiple men. Was this supported by the dharma? They did not know. How will they come out of this situation? That's a story for another day. A long list of people had attended Draupadi's Swayamvara. Here's that list. There was Duryodhana, Durvisaha, Durmukha, Durpradarshana, Vivinshati, Vikarna, Saha, Dushasana, Yuyutsu, Vayuvega, Bhimavegarava, Ugrayudha, Valaki, Kanakayu, Virochana, Sakundala, Chitrasena, Suvarcha, and many other mighty sons of Dhritarashtra. There was also Karna. And also there was Ashwathama, Bhoja, Vrihanta, Manimana, Dandadhara, Sahadeva, Jayatsena, Meghasandhi, Virata and his 2 sons Sankha and Uttara, Vardhakshemi, Susharma, Senavindu, Suketu with his 2 sons Sunama and Suvarcha, Suchitra, Sukumara, Vrika, Satyadhriti, Suryadhvaja, Rochamana, Neela, Chitrayudha, Akshumana, Chekitana, Srenimana, Chandrasena, and the mighty son of Samudrasena, Jarasandha, Vidanda, Danda, Paundraka, Vasudeva, Bhagadatta, Kalinga, Tamralipta, Pattana, Shalya, the king of Madra, and his son Rukmagandha, Rukmaratha, Somadatta, Bhuri, Bhurishrava, Shala, Sudakshina, Kumboja, Vrihadvala, Sushena, Shivi, Ushinara, Paccharanihanta, Sankarshana, Vasudeva, Samva, Charudeshna, Pradyumna, Gada, Akrura, Satyaki, Uddhava, Kritavarma, Hridika, Prithu, Viprithu, Viduratha, Kanka, Shanku, Gaveshana, Asavaha, Aniruddha, Samika, Sarimejaya, Vatapi Jilli Pindaraka, Bhagirata, Vrihatkshatra, Jayadratha, Vrihadrata, Vahlika, Shrutayu, Uluka, Kaitavya, Chitrangada, Suvangada, Vatsaraja, Koshala, Sisupala, Jarasandha. Whew! That was the long list. And who all came to watch this? The celestial beings, Rudras, Adityas, Vasus, Ashwins, Swadhas, Marutas, Kubera, Yama, Daityas, Suparnas, Nagas, Rishis, Guhyakas, Charanas, Vishwavasu, Narada, Parvata, Gandharva, and Apsaras. And that's the long list of people who came to either participate in or watch Draupadi's Swayamvara. Having overheard everything, Drishtadyumna returns back to his palace and reports to his father what all transpired. Very happy that his long-cherished dream has been fulfilled and Arjuna was able to win his daughter's hand, Drupada sends a messenger to the hut of the Pandavas. The messenger informs Yudhishthira that Drupada is now aware, or at least suspicious of their identity and is very interested to bring them back to his palace and is excited about how his daughter is going to marry Arjuna, who won her hand in the Swayamvara. At this, Yudhishthira tells the messenger that even though Arjuna might have won Draupadi, it is now their decision on whom she is going to marry, and they have decided that all 5 brothers are going to marry Draupadi. And Drupada or anyone from Panchala no longer has any right to question or interfere in this decision. And before the messenger can reply, another messenger comes and says, all the arrangements for the wedding have been made. All of you come with us. So the 5 brothers, the mother, and a very confused bride all get on a chariot and go back towards the palace that they have just come out of yesterday. On reaching, Drupada asks Yudhishthira, "Who are you? I have heard suspicions, I have heard aspersions, and I have heard people telling that you are Pandavas, but I want to hear from you who you are." To which Yudhishthira replies, "Your spies have indeed found out the truth. We are the sons of Pandu. This is our mother Kunti, and I am Yudhishthira. These are the four brothers. Arjuna, you already know, he is the one who shot the arrow and won Draupadi. And now all five of us have decided to marry her together." Drupada and everybody else who heard it, including brother Dhritarashtra, are scandalized. Such a thing has never been done. Drupada asks for a day to ponder whether this decision will be in line with dharma or not. And the next morning, when Drupada is no closer to coming to any conclusion, arrives Vedavyasa. And he asks everybody what their opinion is. A sort of a debate starts where Drupada says, "Since I have never heard a single case of one woman marrying multiple men, I cannot believe that this is permitted by dharma." Drishtadyumna says, "I have never heard of such a case also, and additionally, this will make my sister look like a prostitute who will spend her night with multiple men. This is something that I will not allow, and therefore I oppose it." Yudhishthira, when given the opportunity to say his side, replies, "My mind never follows the sinful path. By the very reason that my mind thinks that this is not sinful, this has to be dharma." A bit of a circular argument, no doubt, but then Yudhishthira also gives the example of a woman called Jatila from the Gautama lineage who had married 7 sages, and this was considered according to dharma back then. After hearing everybody's side, Vyasa tells another long story about how there is a case of this Jatila who has married 7 sages and how that came to be, and in the end suggests that this is very much in tune with dharma and therefore should not be prohibited. After having heard what Vyasa has said, Drupada agrees and says everybody can now get married to Draupadi. On the other side of the story though, the spies from Hastinapura have now found out the real identity of the people who have married Draupadi and went on to report to Vidura. Now that all of this is out in public, Vidura no longer hesitates and goes to the court and tells everyone that the spies have brought this news and the sons of Pandu are indeed alive and have not burned and died in the fire from the house of Lac. Dhritarashtra is extremely happy about this and says, "I was so worried about how my brother's sons had perished and his line was extinguished. I am now extremely happy to find out his sons are alive, and therefore I will gladly welcome them back into the fold." Duryodhana is both angry and surprised at how his father responds. So he invites his father along with his brothers and Karna into a closed room and has a meeting there. And when they come out of the meeting, it is agreed that Vidura will go to Drupada and bring the 5 Pandavas and the newly married bride back with him to Hastinapura. The Pandavas return. Dhritarashtra says, "Since there is a possibility that the old enmity may flare up, I give you this land called Khandava. Go there and set up your own kingdom." Duryodhana doesn't like this one bit, but does not object in the moment. This Khandava happens to be a barren land and is covered by a large forest called Khandava Vana. But with the help of Krishna from Dwaraka, the 5 brothers are able to clean up that land, build a beautiful palace, settle a city, start attracting people, and create a kingdom that is one day going to go on to take over the world. How did they clear this patch of forest and turn a barren land into a great kingdom? Well, that's a story for another day. So, what happened in that closed room meeting? Duryodhana took his father, his brothers, and Karna into this room. He chastised his father almost and said, I cannot believe it. You are happy and celebrating that we found the Pandavas are alive? Is that not a great loss for us that we may now have to divide our kingdom with them? Dhritarashtra says, well, since Bhima and Vidura and Drona and others were present, what else could I say? Of course I am as upset as you, but I lied. I don't want them any more than you do. What do you suggest now? To which Duryodhana starts suggesting a series of plans on how to solve this problem, and Karna has a reply for why each one of them cannot work. Duryodhana says, let us bribe Drupada, give him lots of riches and make sure that he abandons the Pandavas. To which Karna says, Drupada has more than enough money and there is no price that you can buy him for. That's a wasted effort. Duryodhana now suggests, let us create conflict between the sons of Kunti and the sons of Matri. 3 versus 2, and if one of them dies, the others will break apart and will no longer be able to hold a united front against us. To which Karna says, they do not think of themselves as stepbrothers at all. They have grown believing themselves to be real brothers, and there is no way a conflict can be created. Duryodhana says, then let's convince them that Hastinapura is not a great place to live in and that they should continue living in Panchala. Karna says, these brothers can never be convinced that they should abandon the land of their parents and go live in their in-laws' place. So that is never going to happen. Duryodhana then says, how about if we incite Draupadi? We create suspicions in her mind, create a fight between her and the husbands. And if the husbands start fighting amongst themselves because of Draupadi, that's a win for us also. And Karna says that will never happen. Kunti will ensure that they stay united. Let's find a way to kill Bhimasena, eliminate the strongest Pandava, and after he is dead, Arjuna is not even 1/4 of what Karna is, and then we can take them down. Karna says, you've tried 1,000,000 times to eliminate Bhimasena. That has never worked. And now he's stronger and more powerful. Don't waste your time. How about if we go and bring them back, says Duryodhana, and along the way, dacoits in our hire, attack us, and only take down the 5 Pandavas. We can help the dacoits along as well. Who is to suspect us? And Karna says, Bhimasena alone will first kill the dacoits and then kill all of us. Do not be foolish. And after every idea of his is dismissed, Duryodhana angrily turns to Karna and says, what do you even want to do? And Karna says, do not fight like cowards. Fight like brave people. Let's go on an all-out war with the Panchala kingdom and along with Drupada and Drishtadyumna and everyone else, eliminate the Pandavas then and there and be done with this once and for all. Now Dhritarashtra is scared and he says, we can't do any of this. Let's find a way to postpone this decision to a later date. Let's go out of this closed room and announce that we are all happy with it and that Vidura should go and fetch the Pandavas back from Panchala to Hastinapura. And now we know what happened in the closed room.
The Pandavas have now settled in Khandava Prastha. Slowly, they're becoming good at ruling this kingdom. The new wife, Draupadi, is settling in well as well. One day, Narada, the Devarshi, comes to meet the Pandavas. And he tells them the story of Sunda and Upasunda, 2 brothers who would have given their life for each other, while they conquered this world and eventually ended up killing each other because of an apsara called Tilottama. The moral of the story being that the Pandavas find themselves in this situation as well, which is having one common woman that they all love, and that may one day lead to some kind of a strife. So Narada advises them to come to some kind of an understanding in which they are able to spend intimate time with Draupadi without having to worry about what the other brothers are thinking. So they come to the arrangement that 1 year Draupadi would be with one brother. The remaining 4 brothers would, at that time, look at her like a sister-in-law and not have any carnal thoughts about her. This agreement goes well, and it is to be implemented with a penance if someone breaks this. So if, say, someone enters the bedchambers of Draupadi when she is intimate with another brother, then they go on a 12-year-long exile to pay the penance for it, or to do what is called paschatapa. This arrangement works well until a Brahmana comes to complain to Arjuna that some thieves have stolen his puja samagri from his sacrifice. Arjuna's weapons are in a place where he has to reach by cutting across the bedchambers of Draupadi, but he knows she is with Yudhishthira at the moment. But he convinces himself that it is a bigger sin to abandon a Brahmana who is looking for help than to break this arrangement that they have between the brothers. So Arjuna walks in, picks up the weapon, and while doing so, sees Draupadi in an intimate position with Yudhishthira. After helping the Pandava and punishing the thieves, he comes back and tells Yudhishthira that he is now going to go into an exile to perform the penance for the line that he has crossed. Yudhishthira tries to convince him. He says, young people stumbling upon older people when they are intimate is acceptable. The other way round is where the problem is, and he should consider not going to the exile because of this. But Arjuna is adamant. He says, if we are going to start finding loopholes in arrangements that we have come up with, before we know it, this turns into a slippery slope and we fall into all forms of problems. So Arjuna goes into exile. And in the exile, he performs a lot of donations, a lot of yajnas. He helps out people, gives out a lot of money. And on his journey, one day, when he is taking bath in the Ganga, he gets dragged to the bottom by a princess of the Nagaloka. This princess is Ulupi, the daughter of Kauravya. And she says she's been watching him from a distance for a while and she loves him more dearly than life itself. He says, as per the agreement because of which I am in exile, I need to remain celibate or be a brahmachari. And therefore, I will not be able to fulfill your desires to unite with me. Ulupi says, if you don't say yes to me, I will die and my death will be upon you. Stuck in this weird conundrum, Arjuna says yes, spends the night with Ulupi, and the next day moves on with his exile or Tirthayatra. Ulupi will eventually give birth to a boy named Iravana, but that's a story for another day. Arjuna continues his journey. He travels and helps people and donates and performs more yajnas. His journey eventually takes him to a place called Manalura, also called as Manipura in some texts. This kingdom is ruled by King Chitravahana, and Chitravahana's daughter is Chitrangada. Arjuna takes one look at her face and falls in love with her. His desire is so strong, he immediately goes to Chitravahana the king and confesses his love for her and says, I want to marry your daughter. Chitravahana tells the story of his kingdom, in which there is a boon running from many generations, which means only one child is ever born and that child goes on to become the king. For many a generation, it was always a boy, and the boy went on to become king up to Chitravahana. But something changed in this generation and Chitravahana is blessed with a daughter. Except she is the only daughter and if she does not become the king of the land or the ruler of the land, then the land is lost. So, Chitravahana informs Arjuna that Chitrangada is not Putri, but instead Putrika. Would you still be willing to marry her? Arjuna says yes. They get married, and Arjuna stays in Manalura for 3 years. Arjuna gets married to Chitrangada, and he lives in Manalura for 3 years. In time, Chitrangada delivers a baby boy called Babruwahana, who will now go on to become the king of this kingdom. In between, when he is in Manalura, Arjuna rescues an Apsara named Varga, who had been cursed along with 3 more of her friends to become a crocodile and live on earth for hundreds of years until a brave prince came and fought off the crocodiles and did not fall prey to them. That's just a side story. Now, when Babruwahana is born, he wishes Chitravahana, Chitrangada, and Babruwahana all the best and goes to Dwaraka. And in Dwaraka, he is going to get married again. With whom? That's a story for another day. What is this Putrika now? I thought this would be a good time to talk about how heirs work and how kingdoms are passed from father to son. Usually, the eldest son goes on to become the king. That is true with Duryodhana, that is true with Yudhishthira, and that is true with all the other people we have talked about so far. A Putri is someone who's a daughter, and a daughter is expected to eventually marry someone and go settle with the husband's family. If she is married to the eldest brother, then she becomes the queen. If not, she remains important but not the queen. A Putrika is someone who's in between, someone who's born a girl but is given the status of the heir, which means even though she marries whoever she desires, she will continue staying in the land and take over the kingdom as a king. The person who marries her has a choice to now live in this kingdom or to find a path elsewhere. A Putrika is like an eldest son in all the legal matters. Chitrangada is that Putrika, and her son Babruwahana will go on to now become the heir of the Manalura kingdom. And when the time comes for them to pick a side to fight on in Kurukshetra, this is going to be one of the very few people who are going to remain non-aligned and not fight on either the Pandava or the Kaurava side. A little more detailed story of Babruwahana is told and will be linked in the description in this video. After his weddings with Ulupi and Chitrangada, Arjuna's journey in the exile continues. And in time, after visiting many places, he finally reaches Dwaraka, the place where his good friend Krishna is settled. One day, he watches a procession in which Arjuna sees Subhadra and falls in love at first sight. Now, remember, Arjuna is on an exile to pay the penance for what happened in Khandava Forest. He is supposed to be leading the life of a brahmachari, but then he is already married twice and he has his eye on a third girl now. He consults Krishna and says, I am in love with your sister and I want to marry her. Suggest me what is the way out of this. Krishna says there are multiple ways of marriage which are considered for a Kshatriya. One is called the Kanya Shulka, in which you pay the price of the bride for the family and then marry the girl. That is not going to happen because we are in no need of money. The other way is what is the Virya Shulka method that you use to marry Draupadi. It is part of Swayamvara, but then it is not guaranteed that she may either pick you or someone else more brave and more skilled than you. So that's a risky place to be in. In times like this, there is another way which is allowed for Kshatriyas, and that is called Harana, which is abduction. If you were to abduct Subhadra and convince her that she should marry you, then society, myself included, will not come in the way. So one day, to perform some puja, Subhadra is going to the Raivataka mountain. Arjuna goes there, scares away all the security and soldiers who have accompanied her, puts her in his chariot and races towards Khandava Prastha. In advance, he has sent a word through swift messengers to Yudhishthira to tell him he has done this and he is bringing a girl and to be ready for a battle or a war if it starts. Once he abducts this girl and his chariot is racing, the soldiers go back and inform Balarama, who is beyond angry. He's bursting with anger and says, "This is the worst insult anyone has ever done to us. We let him stay in our house. We treated him like an honored guest. And this is how he returns it? By kidnapping our daughter? Let's build up our entire army, go follow him, catch him and kill him right now and avenge the dishonor that he has brought to this house of Yadavas." He turns to Krishna and asks, "What do you think, Krishna? He's your friend after all." Krishna is calm as ever and he says, "You don't know how strong Arjuna is. You don't know how great the house of Pandavas is. To get our sister married in that house is a great honor, not dishonor. And in fact, if you take your entire army and fight with him, and I have to guess, we are going to lose to him single-handedly, and that will bring dishonor and disrepute to our house, not him taking our sister away. I'm happy to come with you, stop him from where he is going, but let's first ask Subhadra, is she up for this marriage or not? And if she is ready, then I don't think we should block them from this." This is what happens. They eventually catch Arjuna, and in this duration from the abduction up to the point of being caught, Subhadra has made up her mind that she will marry Arjuna. Balarama honors Krishna's words and brings Subhadra and Arjuna back respectfully. They marry at Dwaraka and stay there for some time. Eventually, Arjuna is going to take Subhadra with him and return to Khandava Prastha. In these 12 years of exile, Arjuna marries 3 princesses and with them has 1 son each. With Ulupi, it is Iravan. With Chitrangada, it is Babruwahana. And with Subhadra, it is Abhimanyu. All 3 boys play some role in the Mahabharata. Iravan, of course, reaches Mahabharata and spends an entire day killing a lot of Kaurava army and eventually falls to the Asura Alambusa. Babruwahana, like we have already seen, decides to stay non-aligned and does not fight. But after the war is done and an Ashwamedha is going to be performed, we see Babruwahana playing a role then. And Abhimanyu, we know, is probably the single most important minor character in Mahabharata, in that his death is going to become the biggest turning point in Mahabharata. All 3 stepbrothers have a big role to play, but these are all respectively stories for another day. Arjuna returns from his 12-year exile, and with him comes prosperity also to Khandava Prastha. He starts winning a lot of kingdoms for his brother, bringing other kings under their suzerainty, and slowly Khandava Prastha is expanding its reach. More and more people in neighboring countries decide to come and settle in Khandava Prastha now, but this is still a slow process. They don't have enough land. In time, Krishna arrives at Khandava Prastha. He has come from Dwaraka to spend some time with the Pandavas and his sister Subhadra. One day, when it is really hot, Arjuna suggests to Krishna that they should go towards Yamuna and spend some time in the cooler climate there. Krishna, Arjuna, Draupadi, Subhadra, and many other people with them travel to the banks of Yamuna, have fun and frolic there. Krishna and Arjuna are sitting by the side and talking about the great achievements they have done when they were away from each other, and something happens which will forever change the fate of Khandava Prastha. As Arjuna and Krishna are sitting on the sides and talking about their various conquests, a Brahmana arrives. His eyes are lit like fire and his hair is the color of gold. Instantly, Krishna and Arjuna both stand up in respect for this Brahmana and ask him what he is looking for. He says, I am hungry, and I'm so hungry that I could eat this entire forest. Confused, Arjuna and Krishna ask him what he means and how they can help him. This Brahmana turns out to be the god of fire, Agni. And he says, I want to eat this entire forest to satiate my hunger, but Indra's friend Takshaka lives in that forest, so every time I try to set fire to it and eat all the creatures in it, Indra will rain upon it and extinguish the fire. I'm looking for two brave and skilled warriors who will be able to stop Indra from extinguishing the fire, and also any animals that try to escape from the fire in the forest. Arjuna tells Agni that we are those warriors, but we don't have the right kind of weapons. Now, if only I had a bow that was so powerful that it could handle the speed at which I fire. If only I had a few quivers which contained inexhaustible arrows that I could use to create a net of arrows over the forest. And if only I had a chariot that could carry the weight of such a quiver, and horses that were white and radiant and strong enough to draw such a chariot, I will be able to help you. And my friend Krishna here is very powerful, but he lacks a weapon that he could use to stop Indra from attacking. Agni says that can be easily fixed. So he reaches out to his friend, the god of water, Varuna, and asks for everything that Arjuna needs. So Arjuna gets from Varuna the Gandiva bow, 2 quivers of inexhaustible arrows, a chariot like no other in the world, and white horses that are as radiant as Arjuna expected them to be. Krishna also gets from Varuna Sudarshana Chakra, a discus that he could throw to kill his enemies. With all these weapons in hand, Arjuna and Krishna start defending the forest against Indra's attack and also stopping and blocking the way of the creatures within the forest that may escape. Agni sets fire to Khandava Vana, and everywhere animals start falling dead. Any animal that tries to escape, Arjuna and Krishna are there to take care of it, and they send it back into the forest. Indra, when he is told that this forest is being burned, is angry and starts raining upon it. But by now, the forest fire is burning so hot that his clouds are evaporated along the way. And any water that may reach, because of how heavy the rain is now blocked by a net of arrows that Arjuna has created from his inexhaustible quiver. This now has become a battle of ego. Indra starts summoning everybody he can, and to his help arrive Suparnas, the great eagles who are relatives of Garuda. To his help come serpents or nagas, and gods and Gandharvas and Yakshas and Rakshasas, and all of them fight with Indra against Krishna and Arjuna, and they still lose to the 2 warriors. All the gods also attack and are taken aback when they can no longer fight to the might of Arjuna and Krishna. Tired and frustrated, Indra cuts off a peak of Mandara and throws the entire mountain at Krishna and Arjuna, and they are somehow able to survive that also, although it ends up killing a lot of other creatures in the forest. But from out of nowhere, a disembodied voice comes, an Akashvani, if you will, which announces to Indra that, why are you even doing all this? Takshaka, your friend, is not here in Khandava Prastha at all. After hearing this, Indra returns back to Swargaloka. Indra no longer cares about who lives and who dies. Everybody in the forest dies except 6 people: a snake, an asura, and 4 birds. The land that is procured after burning the forest down will now be used by Pandavas to finally expand their kingdoms from Khandava Prastha and become even bigger and better, and one day go on to shine as the place to be. It will then be called Indraprastha. This is the end of Adi Parva. The snake that escapes from Khandava Vana is called Ashwasena. Ashwasena's mother is trying to escape with Ashwasena in her mouth. And as she is almost flying out of the conflagration, Arjuna spots it and hits an arrow that cuts off the neck of the snake. And while the mother falls in the forest, Ashwasena himself, a small snake fit into his mother's mouth, falls outside of the forest and survives. He watches how his mother has died and who killed her. This Ashwasena will one day come back to seek revenge. But that's a story for another day. The Asura who survived, Mayasura, turns out to be a great architect and a builder. And he is eventually hired to build the Palace of Illusions for Pandavas. That also is a story for another day. The 4 birds that survive, it is a long story going deep into whether a woman cares more about her husbands or her children, and leads to a lot of conflicting morals. As interesting as that story is, we will not be covering it in this series, but it is referenced here as extra credits for you to go and look into if you want.